So before I say anything else, my name is Louise Claassen. I'm an executive fellow with Henley Business School. I'm particularly interested in this continent of ours. I am an unashamed Afro-optimist, always have been and always will be. I'm part of the team that brought the PGDIP Africa to life this year. We almost finished with our very first program and it's been incredibly exciting. And then with that, I also have this fascination with the African Continental Free Trade Area because I believe it is the one area that will really make us as Africans look inward and see opportunity and make connection and create in ways that potentially we haven't thought of before. And so I'm so blessed to be a part of this series of conversations that Mamodise and then of course also Barry van Zyl has put together on this particular platform. So Barry is not well. We're sending hi to him and hope he feels better soon. Mamodise is with us. Mamodise, do you want to pop up and say hi and share some of your interests and hopes and dreams for this particular experience?
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's so lovely to see everyone join us for our first episode of what we hope to be a continuing series, not just of knowledge sharing, but of doing business together across the African continent. I myself am a PGDIP Africa student, and I'm very proud to be part of the first cohort that is very much about doing business in Africa. And in my case, selfishly, particularly enjoying nuances around cultural intelligence. But I think for the purposes of this hour, really this platform was created for you. The alumni during our third Wednesday sessions have been chatting about bringing this to life. This has been cooking since around November 2020, and today we kick off our first session. More than it is a webinar or a session, we really hope that you will be able to join us in creating a community of practice around how we can work together towards making free trade on the continent a reality for all our businesses and on different levels of business, whether you're corporate, whether you're SME, everyone is welcome. So really and truly, this platform is about your voice more than it is about Henley or Louise or the alumni team that has been part of this setting up. I also would like to invite Emmanuel Akoto, who is the Ghanaian alumni chapter lead, and he's based in Accra. And he's very much been very instrumental in making these sessions happen. So Emmanuel, just a few words from you, and then we can hand over to Louise if you're able to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mamu. I'm really excited that this has taken off. Even though a little bit disappointed that I'm not finding a lot of my colleagues from Ghana signing on at the moment, but hopefully I'm sure they will join us soon. I'm looking forward to really exploring the opportunities that the free trade area holds for us. Surely the potentials are great, but how do we tap into it? So I'm looking forward to learning from these sessions. Thank you.
So what our plan is today, and then there's the plan, and then there's plan B, so we'll work between those two, is to give you a bit of an overview of the state of play around the African Continental Free Trade Area as things are right now, with a bit of information about what it actually is and how it stands right now. What we'd like to do today is then work with Paul's business, Auldon Toys, who they produce toys in Nigeria, but they export to a number of different markets, South Africa included, which means, of course, that the African Continental Free Trade Area presents a number of opportunities. And so we want to work with Paul's business as an example, as a case study around what this could mean for a business like his. Toys being one of those objects that is quite price sensitive. So there's an elasticity at play, which means that there could be significant upside for a business such as Paul's. So let's get into the what and the hows of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And then as soon as we've done that, let's stop and get into conversation with Paul around his business and see if we can get into the nitty-gritties. What does the African Continental Free Trade Area mean for us? Opportunities and challenges. This is Paul, who we hope to be speaking to soon, and his business and state of play. So what do you notice when you look at our continent? One of the things that should be quite obvious to you is that this is a continent with many countries, and many of them are smaller, and many of them have no direct access to the ocean. So 55 countries, that is the number of countries that belong to the African Union. We have a total of 80,000 kilometers of land borders, and then a further 20,000 kilometers of maritime borders in this continent of ours. And so a really fragmented story, and from a trade perspective, difficult, because economies of scale are difficult for smaller countries, and many of those countries fall into that least developed category of countries. So in addition, this is a lovely quote from one of our AU members. We've been brought up with so many borders, so many boundaries, things that divide us. This is an opportunity to push against those boundaries and to change them. We have our little countries, our little economies. Previously, I've shared a story about, the fact that I smile or laugh when people talk about Africa as a country. It's a Chimamanda Adichie story as well. But what if Africa was one market and not 55 countries? There's something in that mental model shift, that mindset shift, that offers opportunity. And so that is something that is really important to contemplate, at least. And part of the story of the African Continental Free Trade Area ends up with this idea of Africa as one customs union, of Africa as one market. And there's something very promising in that. So Africa is diverse, Africa is vast. There's a long-standing pursuit of trade integration in support of growth and poverty reduction. It's very heterogeneous. Our countries come in very many different sizes, income levels, stages of development, trade openness. There are a diversity of trade regimes and trade policies. There are varying patterns of intra-regional trade. And there's a lack of a continent-wide trading hub as things stand at the moment. We're further characterized by different kinds of trade regimes. So there are these outward-looking trade regimes with the US or with Europe that have this kind of preferential characteristic, if you like, and an idea that certainly in future, Africa should very much be a free trade destination for the EU, ? Then we have all these trade agreements amongst different African countries in our regional economic communities, and I'll show you a map of how that plays out in just a moment. And many of those are overlapping. And what we've seen recently is that different regional economic communities are creating arrangements with other regional economic communities, and certainly that creates a level of confusion. And you will often have a situation in which one country belongs to multiple regional economic communities as well. Also an interesting situation. And then there's this web of intra-African trade agreements that also relates to that particular aspect. So it's a very interesting situation. For now, the principle is that where there is an existing trade agreement between two countries, in which the terms are more generous than that offered by the African Continental Free Trade Area, those terms, the more generous set of terms, would be the terms that would be honored. So this is pretty much the picture of it. If you have a look at our continent and the different countries, you'll see that this is the regional economic community picture, if you like, with the African Union all-encompassing. The only country that's not included at this stage is Eritrea, which did not sign up. It's not a signatory. We'll talk about ratification in a moment, which is a different part of the process. But this should give you a sense of how intricate, I suppose, our African landscape is. Certainly, the regional economic communities have a role to play in implementing the African Union's African Continental Free Trade Area. That matters greatly. So they have a role to play. They function at different levels of impact. They have different terms that underpin them, and there are different regional cultures that drive the cultures of these different regional economic communities as well. So 2020 or 2021, we have a population of 1.2 billion people on our continent with a cumulative GDP of $2.5 trillion. By 2030, we're looking at a situation where we might have 1.7 billion people with over $6.7 trillion of cumulative consumer and business spending. That's a really interesting opportunity. That is a really sizable opportunity to be aware of. There is huge room for growth. If you look at Asia, almost 70% of trade in Asia happens on an intra-Asian basis. That is very significant. When you look at Europe, almost 60% of trade happens on an intra-European basis. For Africa at the moment, the number is around 18%. One of the interesting things to note about that 18% though, is that it is mostly made up of agricultural and manufactured goods, rather than the extractive goods that make up the predominant part of what is exported from our continent. Anything that has a value added quality that is exported from our continent means that behind that sits science and technology. There's a requirement for educated people, is research and development. So the more we can scale the amount of value added goods that is exported, that is created and exported on our continent, and that eventually then finds other export markets, that better for us as a continent. So the opportunity is a very significant one, not just in size, quantitatively, but qualitatively, in terms of the quality of skills and capabilities that it brings to our continent and that it allows us to develop as countries. So neighbors trade with neighbors, but not in Africa. Why is that the case? Well, the idea is that since the 15th century, really, Africa has been wired from an infrastructure perspective to be an extractive economy, to export, for goods to leave our country, and then later on, during the Industrial Revolution, for us to become a recipient of manufactured goods. So really what we are trying to do, what we're trying to undo is centuries. Centuries of having this very particular mental model of how Africa is inserted into the global economy. And that's something that we want to shift. Very important to note that the African Continental Free Trade Area is something that has been designed by Africans for Africans. This is not an external initiative. This is us, for us. And that really matters because so much of the reason why Africa was wired in this way to extract value was not because of Africans, has been because of the way that Africa has been divided in the interest of others. So this is by Africans for Africa, and that matters hugely. And for anybody that thinks in any way of participating in this process, it's something to keep front and center of mind. This really relates to what I said a little bit earlier. Exports to outside of Africa, mostly extractive in nature. Exports to within Africa, predominantly non-extractive in nature, and in fact, value-added goods in some way, shape, or form. Very important. So we've really covered this, so I won't stop there. What is the African Continental Free Trade Area? It is a treaty that helps to create certainty around intra-African trade. Every business person wants to know that the goods that are going across the continent will not be seized or discriminated against in any way, that there will be a level playing field. Tariffs in Africa are relatively high at over 6% on average, and these will be brought down to 0% for 90% of products. That will take time, up to 5 years really. to finalize, but that process has started and early signs are promising. Non-tariff barriers such as roadblocks, being harassed at borders, anti-trade behavior, etc., is something that we're going to need to take very, very seriously as Africans on all fronts. So it is the flagship program of the AU Agenda 2063. If that's a document that you haven't had a look at, it really is worth looking at. It's a big dream and really a phenomenal one. Instrument for solidarity, an instrument for connection between different people, basically dismantling the borders and the barriers that are there. A greater opportunity for goods and services to move freely and efficiently, as well as people. A very important lever for achieving multiple objectives. Things like youth unemployment, food security, etc., falls under that heading. And they here, boosting employment opportunities, especially for our very, very, very large, very youthful population on this continent. Improving food security, increasing competitiveness of our industrial products, and then enhancing, putting us on a more even footing in participating on the continent in global trade. So far, 54 out of the 55 countries have signed up to the African Continental Free Trade Area. The one that hadn't is Eritrea. 36 countries, as at Feb, 36 of the countries have ratified the agreement domestically, which is more than what's needed to get going, which is why this was implemented on the 1st of January this year. So the trade area came into effect on the 1st of January. The Secretariat is based in Ghana, appropriately, and His Excellency Wamkele Mene is the Secretary General of this particular area. So a little bit of technical information, and that I think is our last bit before I get us into conversation with Paul. The agreement establishing was brokered and adopted by 44 of the 55 member states initially, but then later all the states except for Eritrea joined, as I mentioned. In a particular country, up to at least 90% of goods from that country, or tariff lines as they're called, should be 0% tariff lines after the 5-year period. In other words, fully liberalized. Sensitive products could be up to 7% of tariff lines, and these, for not least developed countries, should be liberalized after no more than 10 years. And then for a given country, there might be up to 3% of tariff lines that would never be liberalized. That could be protected industry within that particular country, and a country will decide what those are for themselves. Right. So I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to ask Mamodisi if there are any questions. Let's take 1 or 2 questions. And I see we've got Paul with us as well, which means we can get into conversation with Paul very shortly after that then. Mamodisi, any questions we need to pay attention to?
Yes, Louise, there was an earlier one from Bradley Bourne. He owns a bulk food trading company exporting into Africa. He's representing 11 countries across the continent, and trading hasn't been easy. And he would like to understand the trading opportunities that are available, as he's also an Afro-optimist.
Wow, thanks, Mamodisi. I didn't expect such a wonderful introduction. It's just refreshing to connect with Henley again. I haven't done so for a few years. Good afternoon, everybody. I just made the comment really to, there's not a question as such, it's just, that's what I think Louise asked, what would you like to get out of the session? And that's really my quest this afternoon. Louise, it's just, when I deal with countries across Africa, there's a dark side to trading too. And I started off by saying I'm an optimist, I absolutely am. But there are certain groups of commercial, let's call them in inverted commas, institutions, a large business that dominate the African trade quite a bit, and it's a very dark side. And I was sort of looking for the lighter legal side where there are opportunities around product and duties linked to that product or a forward view of those duties. So we can start I can start thinking about those lines. So I suppose the devil's in the detail. I just wanted to understand, at a high level, what this AfCFTA means. So without gobbling up too much time, that was really my interest in today's session.
Jeez, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you for that contribution. I want to almost come back to that once we've gone through Paul's story, because I wonder if there are going to be similarities in what Paul is experiencing and what you are experiencing. And I want to also acknowledge that there is a very dark side to trading on this continent for different reasons. And that I think is going to be part of the challenges that we need to address in very significant ways, and that it doesn't help to be optimistic only. Realism has its place here. So I've taken a note here of what you've said. I want to get into conversation with you, Paul, and then come back to Bradley's question and see what other questions we can stir up. Paul, it's so good to see you again. How are you?
Lovely. Louise, how are you doing?
I'm very well. So, Paul,
So
you have built this incredible toy business. Please, can you tell us about your business? Can you tell us a little bit of its history? Can you tell us where your toys are made? Can you tell us who you export your toys to and what your domestic market is like? Please let us into the world of Auldon Toys.
Auldon Toys. Auldon Toys. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm always excited to be on any platform that represents Henley, being that I'm also the chapter head of Henley Alumni Association in Nigeria. So actually, I'm Paul Orajiyaka. I'm the CEO of Auldon Toys. Auldon Toys is actually a company. We sell all kinds of toys, from educational toys, recreational toys, play toys, and all the rest. But as a business, we are reputed for our African themed toys. These are dolls that depict African culture. Out of the last count, we have over 15 tribes represented across Africa. South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and then it's something we started and we grew organically. And then ever since, we're promoting unity around the different tribes, where girls of young better from their play items, and then starting with the three dominant tribes in Nigeria, we expanded to about 8 other tribes in Nigeria. And for us, we're looking forward to also having as an opportunity to actually see how far we could actually expand this into the African market, so to say. So that's why after free trade agreement is of utmost importance to us. Now, what I just want to speak more about would be our business in terms of the value chain that we have around our business. One of them is that we have these dolls being made locally. I don't know what's happening with my video, but I'm sorry. But I will continue to talk if you can hear my voice. So the value chain is that these dolls actually have a lot of people working in terms of local women. We have technical college students of our different technical schools in Nigeria making the clothes, the dolls, and the beads for the dolls. We also have even foundations like they call the Friends of the Disabled. These are young girls and boys who actually are for one form of disability or the other. We actually engage them to make the clothes for these dolls. And so apart from just making income, we also have a business model that have values being passed across to especially those of them who are not being able to be fully engaged, looking at the competitive market in Nigeria where they don't have jobs, so they find it easy to work with our business. And also, these are the things that we feel that as we grow our business and expand into African market, we can actually also bring this valuation across the different countries where we operate. For instance, in South Africa, where we also have our business, you find that we can actually have engage, people who probably are who don't have much income, but so long as they have the skills, they could learn how to make clothes for the doors, beads for the doors. So across, as we expand into Africa, we intend to expand these value chains across the whole place. And talking about the free trade, Africa Free Trade Agreement, it's been something that I would look forward to, but I think I would, Louise has expanded more on what it entails. So I'm not going to be speaking about it as a concept, but rather I want to dwell more on the challenges that we face working and taking advantage of this laudable initiative. One of the greatest challenges we have is that while the African continent is trying to open up this market and open up the borders, I think it's imperative that the countries themselves also liberalize how businesses should be run in their countries in terms of foreign businesses coming to operate in such countries. Take for instance, I want to mention Ghana. Ghana is just next door to Nigeria. But aside from taking advantage of this AfCFTA Free Trade Agreement initiative, it's hard for us as a business to actually get into Ghana and start a business because you require to have $1 million investment capital to get into this country. And then you can't open the borders, but meanwhile, you have some other restrictions that actually stifle the business corporation. Even if you want to have it like partly owned, fully owned, whichever way you want to think about it, you need to cover as much as $1 million. And this is not the best way to actually allow SMEs across the continent to actually expand their businesses. So we find it very difficult to say, okay, while the agreement has taken a lot of things into cognizance to open the borders and create a uniform market system for Africa so that it can promote inter-trade trade, it's also very difficult for businesses to operate where the laws guiding these countries are actually also stifling the cost of the participation. So I think the most important thing we need to do and talk about will be how will the African countries involved allow other people to come in, apart from an open border, to actually set up these businesses and grow within their countries. So I think it is something I've been thinking about, and I'm glad that the Nigerian government is also taking it up with maybe countries like Ghana and Nigeria. The same thing. It's important that while we're talking about the free trade agreement, we should also talk about what are those policies that we need to dismantle to allow businesses to actually strive across the borders. So I think for us as an alumni network, it's very important for us to think about ourselves in this kind of networking opportunity to see whether the policymakers in our respective countries would actually mitigate and bring down some of these challenges that aside from the free borders or open borders that they're trying to initiate, other things like I just mentioned would be of importance because a lot of policy changes has to also be be taken into cognizance in these countries. So I think it's something that I would wish every one of us, whatever countries you are, in the sense that so long as for this thing to work, we need to also be particularly involved in driving the necessary policy change that would actually enable this free trade agreement to flow seamlessly between SMEs within the continent. So I think these are some of the notable challenges that I would say that we faced with this free trade agreement, and I hope in the course of our discussion, I'll be open to questions and I'll be open to take more insights if there are suggestions people will put across. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I see we have a hand up already. So Sidigwe Magidikidi, are you ready to come on screen? Would you like to come on screen? If not, that's not a problem. But please ask your question or share your comments or your thoughts.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Louis, and also Mahmoud Yusuf for such a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate it, and it was it's very clear. But I just have a question This free trade, I think we all welcome it, and I think we've been waiting for it in Africa. It's a pipeline dream, but I just have a few questions. How is it going to work? Are we learning from these other two continents, for example, Asia and Europe? How did they make it work? Because I think there's a lot of levers, for example, that needs to be pressed before we can make this to work. For example, the issue of skills in Africa. It is difficult for us to exchange skills in Africa, for people in South Africa to go and work in all other different countries in Africa. We do have people in South Africa who are coming from other countries bringing the skills that we need. But I think that area is the area that we need to visit to see how all these governments are going to ensure that there is a firstly exchange of skills moving across the continent, so that even the free trade of products can go together with the skills. But otherwise, if it's only products that moves around without the skills and other resources, then it will be a problem. Because as I'm talking, I work for the Agricultural Research Council, so we work with people with masters and PhDs. We ensure that we do have some of those who goes to Europe, but we don't have a lot of our students going to Africa and some coming to Africa as in terms of exchange of skills and resources. So I think that is my first question. And secondly, the movement itself, for someone to move from South Africa to Zimbabwe, to Lesotho and all these other countries, it's also still very difficult. So now the products are going to move, but even the movement of people is not easy. So these are the key levers that I think the policy developers need to look at them together with this free trade movement in order for us to be able to work across. And I think also more information about this kind of a session, like when you were presenting, I was like, wow, this kind of a presentation at a government level, at a state level, at a private level, it's not there. And people don't have this information, don't know this information. So how are we going to make sure that this vehicle moves across and everyone is aware, and we are open to each other, and then we assist each other in order to achieve this pipeline dream, which is going to also help the issues of unemployment in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Siviwe. There is a lot in that question. I wonder if my partner in crime, Paul, if you have an opinion you want to add, and I can certainly also share some thoughts. Is Paul with
Louise,
us?
I think Paul just dropped off. He's really struggling with his connectivity.
Thanks, Mamodise. We'll find him again as soon as he's back with us.
Yeah.
So, Siviwe, I think the thing to know is that a number of different instruments are being built and are starting to become available. Apologies. Sorry about that. A number of different instruments are being built. So in Ghana, we have in Accra, we have the Secretariat responsible for the African Continental Free Trade Area. And some of what they are responsible for, and then they work with affiliate departments as well, are there to help to start to push back against some of the challenges that we experience in this space. And I suspect that these are some of the things, Bradley, that you think of when you talk about what it is that makes trade so difficult on the continent. So one example is an app-based and a web-based non-tariff barrier reporting, monitoring, and elimination mechanism. You know, when we talk about non-tariff barriers, we are talking about things that happen at customs areas, at borders between countries, that makes the playing field difficult or difficult to navigate or unequal for people from different countries. And those could be trucks from really big listed companies, or they could be women traders, women cross-border traders that get harassed for some reason or another. So a mechanism to report those is being made available, and then that has teeth to follow up and to, you know, to create consequences. So I think awareness, sunlight is the best disinfectant, is one of the sayings that I like best. So that's one of the elements that we're talking about, right? So how do we make what happens at borders something that is easier to navigate, fair, where you know what to expect, and where it's a dignified experience for everybody that goes through that particular experience. So that's one of the aspects that's being created at the moment. How to monitor, report, and eliminate these non-tariff barriers. It's a very nice name for a very challenging set of behaviors that people face on a day-to-day basis when they cross borders. There's another interesting link in this particular chain, and they are called the African Trade Observatory. And it's a mechanism that's being implemented by the International Trade Center to help the African Continental Free Trade Area function when it goes live. And they've begun testing online, and they actually have a very interesting dashboard. So part of what they do is compare trade opportunities in Africa, explore market access conditions of different African partners, and then monitor the implementation process and achievements of the African Continental Free Trade Area. You should be able to go onto the African Trade Observatory portal now, actually, it's live, and look at different products, what they are, where they are. You should be able to compare them, you should be able to explore and find them, and then there's a set of metrics, data, that should be able to allow you to track those. So I think the one thing that really is an interesting part of this is awareness, simply making what is undesirable visible. And I think the second thing is data. Having that data be available, having that data be accessible, and then obviously having it easy to work with and up to date. And again, Bradley, I think these are things that potentially might speak to some of what you experience as frustrating from a trade perspective on our continent right now at the moment too. So Saviwe, I'm gonna leave.
Thanks very much for that, Louise. Thank you.
Thank you. So we really are in a process of implementation right now. And a part of the reason why we as Henley are starting these conversations is because I think we're going to go through a learning process collectively to say, what is this? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for me? And how do we use this collective community that has trust as part of it already to leverage opportunities and to reimagine things into the future? Paul, we've got you back with us. I wonder, thank you, Saviwe, I see you.
Yes.
I wonder if, Mamodisi, were there any questions for Paul on the chat that you picked up?
Yes, Emmanuel had one. Emmanuel, would you like to unmute and ask your question? There was also a comment, I can't see it now, but someone was going through your website and they were suggesting that perhaps you display your prices in dollars on your Auldon Toys website. Emmanuel?
Yeah, yes, it's actually not a question as such. But what Paul talks about, I think Louise also talked around the same thing, which is there would be a very good reason why that restrictive $1 million investment is in Ghana. as it would be in other countries. Just guessing, maybe they want very serious business people to come in and do business, and not just everybody rushing into Ghana to do business. So maybe we have to find out why such restrictive conditions are there and begin to tackle them, shine the light on them and begin to tackle them. I'm sure, as Louise says, it's a learning process. We will get there, but we have to bring out these things and shine the light on them.
Before you respond, Louise and Paul, I just want to feed these into you as well. I know you did allude a little bit earlier, Louise, that we're still in the very early stages of the agreement, but two similar questions. Well, what are the early successes we can pin down since the operationalization of the agreement early January? And closely linked to that, what are the immediate changes that we have seen, particularly around tariffs, if any? Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, I want to come back to you for a moment, and perhaps the Ghana situation could be understood better if you could share with us what your experience in some of the other countries in which you trade are, and what makes the Ghana experience so uniquely challenging. I mean, Ghana is practically a neighbor. Between you lies Togo, Benin. You're both part of ECOWAS. You're both English-speaking countries in a region that is predominantly French-speaking. I mean, it feels like it should be a kinship situation, and yet this is the situation you find yourself in, right? How to your mind, should this work? And I'm definitely also picking up on the fact that you're saying that this is not only about the African Continental Free Trade Area. In addition to that, to ease trade between countries, there will be other things we need to look at. Yes. So in your experience and trading with other countries too, what makes it easier?
Okay, lovely. I will explain to you, because as a business, we have our international operation in South Africa. And then they're talking about our website, and the website you will see in Nigeria is actually more domiciled within the Nigerian context. If you want to trade about our business for the international market, we also have a website that is operated from the South African office. From here, we'll actually export our products to the rest of the world.
I think we're struggling a bit with Paul's connection. I think while we're waiting for Paul to come back, I want to perhaps just share one of my own stories around this. I am a very particular lover of a kind of tea that comes from Kenya called Kericho. Kericho tea. Kericho. I invite you to go and look at their website. Kericho tea is just the way that they've innovated, what they have to offer from a product range perspective over the past few years is remarkable. And what is very interesting to me is if I want Kericho tea in South Africa, because I haven't been able to travel to Kenya for a bit now, I have to order it from takealot.com, and I pay quite a lot for it. Much more than I would, for example, for Twinings in Pick n Pay, if I got it. So it's frustrating, right? It's vexing. Now, I understand because technically, because of our different regional economic regimes, we have had a kind of a free trade agreement with Kenya in place for a while now. But why is Kirichu tea, which is it's a truly remarkable high quality tea made by Kenya, who is also host to the East African Tea Trading Association. So in other words, a lot of the world's teas are traded through that commodity trading desk, if you like. So why is that tea not available in all its beautiful incantations, eye height in our local supermarkets for reasonable prices, at least close to the same price that I pay for it in Kenya, which is what 5 rosettes would more or less cost here. So that's a really big question for me. And I've come to realize that really buying into a different African brand, wholesale, as something mainstream, I should say, takes more. It takes more. I know and love the tea because of visits to Kenya in the past. But how do we convince a Pick n Pay or a ShopRite to stock, or Checkers, to stock a whole range of Kirichu tea? How do we convince a whole range of consumers that this is a local African tea that is remarkable in so many different ways? Not least of which for the level of innovation that has gone into that tea ranges over the past few years. So I think it goes to Paul's point around the fact that it's not only about the African continental free trade area. It's about more than that. So in terms of shifting our mental models around being outward looking compared to inward looking in a continental sense, there's more that needs to happen. And I think that's part of the reason why we're excited to have this as a series of ongoing conversations, because we need to understand what the dynamics are. So relationships are really important in this particular process. Why things work in particular ways, in particular markets, and being able and willing to undertake the charm offensives that it will require to stock our shelves with Kenyan tea and coffee exclusively, and have South Africans absolutely love that, prefer that, and be proud of their Kenyan tea and coffee choices. There's a whole level of psychography that goes into that question that is worth digging into, I think, in a very significant way. Siviwe, I've got your hand up again. And then I want us to visit some of the other questions that's come up.
Yeah, Louise, sorry, Siviwe, before you go, if we can also ask Dumi to be on standby. Dumi, if you don't mind asking your question after Siviwe. Thank you.
Let's do that back to back, Mamodise, because I see we're also running out of time. So Siviwe, please ask your question. If you can be short and sharp, I'd appreciate it. And then let's go to Dumi.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry, Dumi, for jumping the line. Yes, I think my question, I'll try to be short. Based on this agreement, like as I asked before, if we did learn from other countries, Asia, like for example, in China, when they have the free trade, they introduced the Belt and Road Initiative. So I just want to know our model in terms of this. What is it that we're going to use? For example, why don't we have a country that is in the middle that maybe we can use as a trade center, which will be easy for transportation? Because I also think in terms of the transportation, for example, rail and road, and also air freight, I'm not sure if those infrastructure are in place for us to be able to run this, or is it part of the infrastructure that is going to be improved, which I believe it can help the situation. And secondly, opening up of all the African countries for open economy. For example, they need first also to open for tourism in Africa, so which means promote tourism for everyone around Africa, to know your continent, to know the other countries around Africa. It will open up this trade. So I think those are my two questions. First, open economy through tourism, and also a trade center that can also help, maybe identify one country that can help us in that regard. Thank you. So,
thank you. Dumi, your question.
Yeah, I'll make it short. How is it possible to get all African children to say by the time you graduate high school, you should have visited a minimum of 3 African countries as a rule, to say that? For me, that promotes this and demystifies this othering of fellow Africans, the problem of being small economies, that we can't really do much on our own. We need each other very much. But I'd put a question in chat, which is a big one that I wanted to ask, around the bilaterals that we are seeing France and UK and others pushing with former colonies and other African states. Are there incentives that can be put in place, Louise, that can discourage these bilaterals? We see that the UK after Brexit pushing a lot for that, and France, we've seen their leaders coming across. And for me, this is sabotage, and to use a strong word. And Africans need to be stronger. We need AU to be stronger in saying, let's not do this, and let's maintain this and push this. This baby is young and tender. We need to nurture this baby and see it. And I'm a positive Pan-Africanist like you, by the way. Love our continent. And as a youthful continent, it's up to us to do something about it. So let's step up and protect this baby that we just given birth to.
I love it.
Thanks again.
You.
Louise, may I make a statement in response to Dumi? May I?
Please go ahead.
And I didn't mean to hijack your response. I just, Dumi, I think the discussion is very complex. You know, there's 2 sides to the balance sheets as such. You know, so Africa exports to these very European countries, so they've got to protect that as well. So I think it's a very sensitive, but a very real question you're asking. Yeah, and I come across that too, because sometimes I source in Europe, and I have to do trade that way. So it's a very difficult balancing act to me, but a very good question. Sorry, Louise.
No, you're most welcome.
Gradually over time, not suddenly. Sorry, Louise. Thank you.
We need more discussion, and these sessions, it's so amazing how quickly an hour goes. John, let me answer a few questions and then I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much. And there are lots more questions in the chat that we're not going to get to today, but we'll save them and we'll craft some of our future topics around those. So thank you for your participation hugely. The last few comments that I want to make is I want to invite you to please go and look at the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. In that agenda, what you'll find is a number of different objectives, and quite a few of them actually have to do with the way that we connect internally as a continent. One free sky, one free connected air space, if you like, for us as a continent. One passport. The ability to move freely and easily across borders, which is again something that has different meaning for different countries, depending. It talks about railways. Railways is such an important way of moving goods, people across this continent internally. And if you go and look at a lot of the infrastructure developments that's taken place over the last 10 years on our continent and that are slated for the next 10 years, a lot of those has to do with railways for a range of different reasons. But, have a look at in what direction they're being developed and why. That's an important thing to look at. I think another important thing to know, and this goes to, I think, part of what you said earlier, Saviwe, is that there's something called the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System that is being planned. And it's a way for making sure that if you as a procurer have procured a good, let's say from Benin, and you are in Botswana, that your receipt of that good and the provider's receipt of your payment, that happens synchronously. So it's a mechanism that aims to eliminate, that, at least to some extent, any miscarriage of business. So shall we call it that for the moment? So I think that speaks to that. I mean, Saviwe, I can't agree with you more wholeheartedly that we as Africans should be traveling on our continent. And it is disturbing to me that your department doesn't have that kind of skills exchange across our continent, because I think there's an enormous amount of activity on our continent and such incredible developments. And just go look at Kirichu tea. Go and look at Kirichu tea, just as an example. Please do. So, and that's a small example of some of the incredible development that is taking place on our continent. But just from a travel and a tourism perspective, we spent a month in Ethiopia in 2019, October, and it blew my mind to think that there's a place like that 5 hours away from our country. 5 hours away. Ethiopia is 5 hours away from our country. It's one of the most extraordinary places that you'll ever set foot in. It really is utterly remarkable, which means, of course, that this whole civil war in Tigray has been very distressing to follow too. But that notwithstanding, you have to understand that Ethiopia is probably one of the most extraordinary countries in the whole entire world. And then there's Kenya, and then there's Ghana, and then there's Senegal, and then there's so many different places on our continent that one has to visit, that one has to experience. And the easiest place probably to start is Zanzibar, just off the coast of Tanzania. But then don't stop there. Go over to Tanzania. Go over to Dar. Go and experience those other parts of that part of the world as well. It's extraordinary. Go to the fish market, Kivukoni. Go to, drive up the coast. It's remarkable. These are remarkable countries. So it's a choice. It's a choice. Where do you choose to book your next holiday to, and what does it look like? This continent is an amazing place to travel around on, and there are more opportunities than we might even perceive there to be. And they're not all tough outings. Some of them are actually really comfortable ways to travel, and they don't all have to be expensive either, which is another little challenging thing that we need to change. And so I think that's spoken to, and then finally, I think we've spoken to transport, we've spoken to tourism, and then in terms of our African children, I would love to see an exchange program where our African kids go and spend time in other African countries as a kind of a gap year. Wouldn't that just be extraordinary? That's it for me. I want to hand over to our Dean, Prof. John Foster Pedley, who's also joined the school. Thank you so much, John. But I want to also say thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you for your comments and your questions. And if there's something that sits with you that you want us to build into a conversation for a future date, please do, because these will help us to design those sessions and those conversations. And this is just the beginning. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Louise. I'm sorry I missed all this. It's really interesting. I mean, I've just been doing graduations, and it means a lot to me, apart from the fact that as Dean of Henley Business School in Africa, and our motto behind me is we build the people who build the businesses that build Africa. We take that enormously seriously. But also I spent a lot of time in different countries in Africa in my own life doing business and traveling, many. West Africa, not so much Central, but pretty much everywhere else. And I'm as passionate as you, well, maybe not as passionate as you, I don't know, you are very passionate. And in terms of making this happen, I just wanted to thank you all for coming on behalf of Henley Business School in Africa. I want to thank you, Louise, for piloting and pioneering this work. It's so important. And I wanted just to say we're committed to support this series and this work that we're doing, and to find ways that we can really build African activities. I'm on the board of the Association of African Business Schools, which is trying to build universities and business schools across Africa so they work collectively to build a continent. And I really hope we can achieve this. It's so inspiring to see the possibilities. And I'm way beyond the sort of sentimental view of what we can achieve. We are well beyond that, generally speaking. We need to do this with actions, with business, with transactions, with trade, with education, with achievement, and not with a sense that we need to prove anything to the rest of the world, which unfortunately is so prevalent still. But with a sense standing in our own being, with a full confidence that we can build trade and activities and diversify our economies in extraordinary ways. And so this is important to us. I wanted to say that and to thank you all for being here, and I'll hand back to you.